Hello, and welcome back to our second class for the Humble Devs Building a SaaS Journey. All right, all right. Let's okay. Welcome back. Let's continue with where we left off last week. Actually, let's review very briefly what we did last week, and then afterwards we can continue to work on our CSS. Right. Okay, let's start with our HTML review. So it's going to be quite quick as as I was getting ready to cover the CSS topics. It reminded me how little there is to cover when it comes to HTML and how much there is to cover when it comes to CSS. It feels like it's never ending, but we're going to try to get through it as quickly as possible and make the best of it. All right. So HTML again is the foundation of your app, website, however you want to call it. They're at the end of the day the same thing. Back in the day, people used to think of websites as like just a page with some text on it. Nowadays, pretty much any website that you visit is an application in the back end. So that's where the distinction is no longer as clear as it used to be. So yeah, HTML, not a programming language. You use it to set the foundation of your application slash website. Before you do any styling, so here the car is like stripped down to the bare bones of the chassis, and there are no panels, there is no paint, there is no interior or anything like that. And that is what that's what HTML is for us, right? So yeah, HTML markup language is the language for building websites and building anything that has to do with web technology. So even if you're building a web app nowadays, that's going to be your foundation. It's going to provide your structure, and it's going to provide all of the elements for our website. To very quickly touch on the client server model for anyone who wasn't there for the past stream or didn't see it, I'll just go through it very quickly. All right, so let's go back to our drawing of our client server model. Let me take a new color. So your client is here, right? So you're going to be using a device at home where you have a local network, everything that is in blue. All of these devices, they can find each other automatically through the modem that you're using at home because all of them kind of hang out on the same network and can very easily talk to each other. Once you want to go to YouTube or to any other website for that matter, you have to reach out to a location outside of your home through an ISP, which is your internet service provider, that acts as your gateway. And that gateway has its own gateways, and this is where all of this circle of other gateways take you. Eventually, you will find a server that is hosting the website that you want to visit, whether that is YouTube or anything else. And then based on your request, it will send you back the information that you're looking for. All right. And that's basically the client-server model. It will be very important once we get to building something, especially when we focus about the front end. So whatever the user sees and interacts with, and the information that we want to store persistently or over time, or information that we want to store that we don't want to make visible to the user. And that's where the backend comes in. So all of these servers over here, they house a lot of data. Some of it will go to the client, so to the user who is trying to access our application, and a lot of it will just be remaining on the server, something that we maintain over time. These are databases, pieces of information that are maybe dependent on other users other than the one who is logging in at the moment. And that is a very, very brief overview of the client-server model. And then let's continue with our review. By the way, if you have any questions regarding any of these topics that I'm touching upon, please feel free to post it in the live stream chat, and I'll try to handle these as quickly as possible. Moving forward to our internet protocols. So when you visit any website, you are visiting it nowadays mostly through an HTTPS link. HTTPS at the end stands for secure. That means that the connection that you're making from your device to whatever server that you're getting information from is encrypted. So that information is not being sent out as plain text that anyone can read, but is being sent out as text that is encrypted as a very long string of characters that cannot be deciphered without having the key that is either at the client side or at the server side. All right. We touched on the host names. So basically, that's your domain name. If you are trying to reach any website, you're going to enter an address like this one. Again, example, if you're going to YouTube, at the end of the day, the name is going to be translated to an actual IP address where the server is residing. And this is being done through a DNS server. Later, when we're building our app and we want to publish it online, we'll be looking at getting a DNS name for ourselves so that our application can be distinct and that people can visit it based on the name that we choose for it, right? And then we have some path for files or like specific pages on our app, as well as some query elements that might be required for people to access their own pages, for example. HTML structure is very, very important. Again, it's provide the chassis, so it provides the structure of the application that we're building. Because at the end of the day, HTML tells the browser. So in here, we're using a browser like Chrome at the moment. So we're telling the browser, okay, this is an HTML document because it can be anything else. We then have a number of tags that will basically create the layout of our HTML page. And it looks something like this. So inside of our code editor, we always start with defining that we are sending an HTML document. And this is by default going to be HTML5 for any modern browser. We define a language in our header. The header is something that's not visible, right? So let's say that everything below the head, so from the shoulders down, is visible to your client. But anything that is above the shoulders, so anything that is in the head, is not visible. So all of this is metadata for our application, as well as a title that can be seen in the address bar, and all kinds of information to tell the browser how we want to display our app through languages, through character sets, through setting heights and width for the content that the users are going to be seeing. And then we have the body, which will have all of the content of our application, and a footer that generally just houses some copyright information, some extra links, or some additional information for people to visit if they so please. For HTML, one of the most important things is the semantics of it. All right, because everything that you see on a page is hopefully there for a purpose. You can, of course, make a page that's just made out of random stuff, but that's not going to be very useful. So as you build out your HTML structure, you need to tell the browser and all of the other applications that will interact with it. So people who are using screen readers, so people who have like a difficult sight, they don't see very well or they can't read properly, applications that read information automatically. This includes AI or LLM models nowadays. SEO, very important. So for a search engine, so if Google or any other search engine, they want to browse through the pages that you have created just to understand what they are about, they need all of this context to be able to get the information that they're looking for properly. So a header just says this is the main header of my application. A navigation, so the nav says this is my navigation bar. The main section just basically says that whatever is in the main section is the main topic that this page is about specifically. And within that, it's always within the body. We have articles to say that this is an article specifically, so that the article can be taken out by search engine independently from the rest of the page if the page is also housing many different other components. We can divide our pages into sections, which can be targeted for specifically styling, which we will cover in a bit as well. We have a side for like sidebars or additional content that's not very important for any search engine or reading or like automatic reading application to go through. And then we have the footer, right? These are not all of them. These are like the main things that you would normally use, but there are quite a lot of tags within HTML that provide context to the browser and other applications. All right. And then we come into some more interactive things. So as your user visits your app or your website, you might want them to sign up. You might want them to fill out a form or give you some information, or maybe update their own name or email address or something like that. All of these are done through a form. And a form within HTML, of course, has its own tag. So it starts, as we know with HTML, most of the tags, they have a starting tag and an ending tag. And the form is then opened. Inside the form, you can place as many elements as you want. You can provide as much context as you want. And by the end, you would be closing it. Most of the forms will expect at least for something to be filled out. However, you can have a form that takes data and updates the page automatically. This is not something that you can do just using HTML though. So this is something that we'll cover when we get to JavaScript, because HTML is not dynamic, and that is the main purpose of JavaScript itself. So yeah, you can have a button. So if someone fills out a form, you can have a button for them to click on, and then this triggers an action for your database, for example, to take their first name and last name or update any of their personal information. All right. There are some defaults for these. So by default, like anything that is within the form tag itself is of course, you can see that here on the screen. The form itself is invisible, so it doesn't really have any. If you just create a form without any component inside of it, it won't be visible on your page. And by default, all of the form characters don't allow for more than, or all of the form fields don't allow more than 20 characters. So that's something that you'll have to configure yourself when you're building out the form. And the forms also have a lot of versatility. So you can have many different types of fields. So in the example that we have here, we're just basically having two text fields. As you can see here, we have an input, we have a type, and the type is text. But there are plenty more. So it can be text, it can be email, it can be a password, and all of these behave differently, right? So if you are just providing a text field, then people can just enter text in there, right? If you say that I want an email address, the browser will try to check whether someone is actually putting in an email address, not just some random characters. If you're entering a password, this would by default also be invisible, so the user doesn't see it. And you can, of course, toggle this on using other features that will allow the user to see the password, and so on and so forth, right? So you have checkboxes, you have radio buttons that people can click on. You have like a date input field, so that when someone clicks on it, the browser will automatically show them a date selection menu instead of you having to like design one from scratch. So all of this is built into the browser functionality by default, and you're just calling upon it. If someone is trying to add a file, if you have like a file input, someone clicks on it, it automatically opens their Finder or like their window manager on their computer to show them a file that they can select. and all of these. And besides the different input types, they can have also different attributes. So you can give them a name, you can give them an ID, you can give them a value that's populated before the form is even used. So just like we have here, we're setting a text field. And the text field already has a value of John for the first name, so this will already be displayed. Normally, you wouldn't be doing that on a form that you expect someone to fill out. So you'll have a placeholder, for example, which will be text that will be grayed out by default, so it will be light gray. And then when the user clicks in the box, it will disappear and allows them to immediately type something. And again, all of this is default browser behavior. So this is not something that you're programming yourself. You're just telling it, okay, I want some placeholder text here, and the browser understand, okay, this is something that's going to be temporary. When the user clicks on it, I'm going to get rid of it so that they can type in their own input, right? Required to make something mandatory, and then read only to make something not interactable anymore for the user. If you have a form and the user can select something, based on the selection, you might want to disable a field that comes after that, so that they cannot change it anymore, for example. All right. Moving on to embedding media images. We'll cover these at length when we are talking about CSS, so we're just going to browse through this for now. Again, another note regarding image tags, which are automatically closing. So we have an audio that opens here and closes here. We have video that opens and closes. For the images, it is auto closing. So it's just one tag without a dedicated closure tag. Okay, so live action for HTML was for last week. For now, we're going to keep on moving on with CSS. Let me just have a very quick look. Okay, just checking that everything is still running fine. We're good to go. All right. So CSS is a very, very exciting topic. And CSS itself, so I mean, we covered most of the things that someone who's just building an application should know about HTML in a single session, which is very easy to do. When it comes to CSS, there is really a lot to cover. But again, we're going to try and focus on the things that are really, really important that you should be aware of. It's not about you becoming a CSS master or like spending a lot of time practicing it, because especially with the way that we're going to build our applications going forward, we're going to utilize a lot of AI models in order to do the heavy lifting for us and put in a lot of the logic on our behalf. So we wouldn't even be in a position where we'll be writing a lot of CSS ourselves. However, it is very important for you to know what your options are, because at the end of the day, whatever code will be generated for you, it will have mistakes at some point. That is for sure. So it's very important for you to know how it works and what the different functionalities are of CSS, so that when something isn't being generated correctly, or you have something that was already functional and all of a sudden is now broken, that it becomes easy for you to know, or at least know where to look in order to fix it, right? Because other than that, I've myself experienced using an AI to just update something that's very trivial on a website that I had built, and it broke the entire website while I could have done it myself in 5 minutes. So it's not perfect. It will create things for you that don't work properly out of the box, and sometimes fixing it is very easy if you know what you're looking for. So this is why it's very important for you to know what your options are with CSS before letting AI generate the CSS on your behalf, so that you can play around with it and fix things and change things on the fly if you want something that it doesn't fully understand. right? So what is CSS? Just like we're using HTML version 5, we're currently using HTML CSS version 3. The versions aren't really all that important. There is no other version currently that's being used. It's also quite old at the moment, so it's not that you have to work across different versions, but just so that you know. So CSS stands for cascading style sheets, and we'll get to the cascading in a bit. We also saw in the previous session that we can add some styling. So this was a page that we built in the last session, that we can add styling, like making the background gray, like changing the color of the text, and even like giving the application background and whatnot. With HTML, right, out of the box. So why would we use CSS instead of just putting the styling inside of HTML? There are many reasons which will become very apparent as we go through today's session. But the first one is cleaner code. So as you are building your application, and as you're like building out the content of your page, you don't want to fill it out with all kinds of formatting, because you will have more formatting and styling in your HTML than you have actual content. That's how it will end up being. So for cleaner code, so separating, so it's called separation of concerns, where your HTML is only there for structure, content, and semantical context, right? And your CSS is there only to provide styling. And then when you want to change the styling, you just go to your CSS and change the styling. If you want to change your content, you go to HTML and change your content, right? And you don't have to mix the two up. So it makes it easier to maintain your application. It makes it faster to load, because the different files can be loaded separately. So the browser, when it reads your HTML, it can just go through it quickly and then adding the styling on later, instead of having to kind of go through both of them at the same time. And if you're going to collaborate with someone to build your app, it will also be much easier for you to delegate one of these tasks. So whether it is building the HTML part or CSS part, and then you can work separately without having to continuously be working on the latest version of that document. So linking your style sheet inside of HTML, we already saw. So if I we'll see that on the code editor in just a bit. So inside of our HTML, we have to link our style sheet. So in here, we have a link function. So basically a link tag within HTML that says, okay, I'm going to link a document. The relationship, that's where the rel stands for, is style sheet, to say that, okay, this is where I'm going to provide my styles. And the href is basically saying this is the link to that document. And we have a document in the same folder that is just called style.css, right? And a sample of what can be inside of a CSS file, this is just a very small sample, is we want to have the entire body of our CSS have all of these different attributes. So we set a font, we set a background color, we set a minimum height, which we'll explain in a bit, and we're setting a color, which will be the color of the actual text. All right. It's very important for you to know how a CSS selector works, because that's going to be pretty much everything that you're going to do with CSS. So there is a selector, and in here it is selecting a HTML tag. So it says, okay, or at least let me say an element. So it's selecting an HTML element. So a div is an HTML element that we're selecting. And then we have a curly brace that opens, right? And it closes here. And within the curly braces, we have all of the properties. So we can have multiple ones, right? So if I go to the previous slide, you see that we're selecting the body, we're opening the curly brace. We have a property for the font. We have a property for the background. We have a property for the minimum height and for the color, which is the text color. So we're saying this is the property that we want to address specifically for the div in this instance. And then after having a column, we are then providing the value, right? And these values can be very, very varied, which again you'll see as we continue. And then at the end of that specific notation, so for that property and providing the value, we have to close it with a semicolon, because otherwise this is not considered closed. So CSS will think that on the next line we're providing more information for the same property, right? So where does the cascading, what does the cascading mean for the cascading style sheet? So style sheet is easy. So it's style sheet and it's document. The cascading part is very important for you to be very aware of, because in a CSS document, you will have a lot of declarations for styling, for different elements, for different, all of the different components of your HTML. And you can also overwrite whatever you're providing. So if you start, for example, with a styling for a div in your CSS, and somewhere down in that same CSS, you're also targeting a div without anything else. So this is a div, and that one is also just a div. And the font weight there is not bold, but italic, for example, right? This will not apply, because as the browser reads the CSS, it will read it from top to bottom, right? So it will start all the way to the top and read through it. And the last remaining value that it took for a div and its font weight, so how thick the font is, so the text is, that is the value that the browser will actually use to render your page, right? So again, if I have like headings that I'm styling and I'm targeting the H1 headings at the start of my CSS, and somewhere at the end of my CSS by accident, I also add another selector that also does the heading, then I might have a heading that has a very different styling than the one that I was expecting, right? So in that case, I would have to know that, okay, I'm seeing styling that's not the one that I want. So most probably I'm overwriting my styling at some point. So generally within CSS, not always, so there are exceptions. Whatever is declared last is the thing that will get used, right? And if you're building your CSS out gradually, this isn't really going to be a big deal. But again, if you're generating your styling through an AI model or through like any other library that will automatically generate a lot of CSS for you, this is something that can very easily happen. And it can take you some time to like track down where that exactly is and fix it. But it's something that you really need to be aware of. So we're going to cover a couple of examples of the selectors, because there are a variety of them. We can select HTML elements. So an H1 is an element, so we don't need to name this one specifically, and this will apply for any H1. So this is just a heading of the largest size, and it's just we're just making the text color, for example, here blue, navy, right? We can also select a class. And within CSS, a class is denoted with a dot or a full stop. So we're saying here dot product card. So that means if anywhere in our HTML we have something, so whether a div or actual item, so we have, for example, a span that has a class, and if that class says product card, then this will apply to it, right? So here we're making the border 1 pixel wide, and we're making solid with a whitish color. And then we have IDs. So classes can be used anywhere. And this is something that you'll see most commonly. So if we're going to style, for example, all of the headings of anything that will come up in our application, we might create one specific class. We will not target like any heading through the element itself, but we're going to say, okay, we're going to apply a class to all of the headings that we want to have that specific styling, and then we'll style everything within that class selection, right? The ID is different because you can only have one unique ID per page. So this can only be used once in your HTML page. And this is something that mostly is used for main navigation or for your hero section, because these will be very different than anything else on your page. You can also not use them altogether. There is no need to use the ID attribute specifically if that's something that you don't need. But here, for example, in this example, we have a div that has a class and it has an ID. So this ID of to-do cards for my to-do application cannot be used on any other element in that same HTML page. So it's only this element that can use this ID. And then we have input selection. So we covered forms, right, during the HTML review. So you can also select any other attribute within HTML. So here we're saying that, okay, for inputs specifically, so this is going to be a form input. And of an input, we only want to target the type, text. We're going to give these a border that is blue, right? And this can, of course, be anything else. Moving on with more selectors, because you can make it more complex. So you can select descendants. So you're saying, okay, I want to target the product card class, so dot product card, right? So it stands for class. And within any element that has the class product card, any H2 will have this green type, color of text, right? So this is a selector of a descendant, right? So this is something that we start with, and then we're targeting something that comes after it or is indented inside of it, all right? And we have multi-selectors. So basically, if we want to style all of our headings the same, we just want to give them a color, for example, we can say, okay, H1, comma, H2, comma, H3, and it will just say that, okay, this applies to all of them, right? And then we're giving the styling that we want. So this is just selecting multiple elements or attributes or anything else. And then we have a universal selector. And this is used mostly to set things that you want to be set globally in your CSS. And this is something that we might look into a bit later. But it's just an asterisk, so a star. And then this basically selects everything. And then we can select child. So if we have a navigation and we have the UL, so an unordered list inside of the navigation, that is the child. So we're saying, okay, we want to select a child of the nav, and that child must be an unordered list. And that's what we're formatting. So it wouldn't apply to any other unordered list on the page, but just the one that is a child of a nav element. All right. We'll implement some of these as we go. So it's not just going to be slides. So don't worry. But I'm just trying to cover them before we dive in, so that you understand what they do. And then we have siblings, which is something that you will most probably not be using a lot. So this is, okay, if I have an H2, so I have a heading, right? And this is then followed by a paragraph, right? So if there is a paragraph after it, I want to style it in this kind of sense. So this is not very precise. So it's again, that's why it's a bit uncommon. And then we have an adjacency. So if we have a heading, and immediately after the heading we have a paragraph, we wanted to have that styling. Again, you'll most probably not be using these. Something that you will be using quite a lot are pseudo classes, which are classes for events. So here, the A stands for anchor, which is a link inside of HTML. And what we're saying here is that, okay, an anchor, so any link inside of our page, the colon here just means that there will be an action that will happen. That's what we're targeting. And this is hover. As you can see, I have my mouse here. As I'm hovering over this image, it is allowing me to make it bigger, right? So For the same happens when you have an anchor inside of an HTML page. When you hover over it, it will become something that is clickable, right? So if we go to our page and we're going to go and hover over the menu items, you will see the hand icon to show that these are clickable, right? So this is the hover pseudo class, because this is not an element at that moment. This is a behavior that you're targeting, right? This is not an element that exists, right? So we have an anchor, and when we hover over it, we want to make the text, so color is targeting the text, orange. So if we would apply this and we would go to our page and we would hover over it, as you can see, the text becomes orange, right? And this is where the hover pseudo class comes in. The same goes for like input focus. So if we have an input field and then the focus means that the user is interacting with it. So here, if we have, for example, these text fields, so when I'm not interacting with it, so here we're not hovering, but focus, right? So focus means it is currently in focus for the user. When we click in it, that becomes in focus. This is the field that we're interacting with. It will have this border. So this CSS is dependent on the fact that the input is in focus at that point in time. And if we remove the focus from the field, the CSS does not apply anymore. All right. Okay. So moving on to a bit more targeting. So during last week's session, when we kind of put together some elements in a page for demo purposes, I said that, okay, at some point we will be styling with CSS our navigation bar, and we'll be removing these bullet points, right? And this is exactly what we've done here. So the bullet points are gone, and that is simply because we are targeting. So basically, we're saying that, okay, just like you've seen, like during the selection, we're selecting a header. And inside the header, we're selecting the nav. And inside of the nav, we're selecting the unordered list, which are these two links right here, right? And these can be more. And we're saying that the list style, so this is an attribute, right? The list style, right? Because it's an unordered list, and the unordered list itself has some dedicated styling to it. And in here, we're saying, okay, the list style, we want to be none. So there is no more list item, and that's why the bullet points are gone. And you can change these, so you can make these square, you can like change how they look like and whatever. So there's quite a lot there. And we're saying that the padding and margin we haven't touched upon yet, which we'll get to shortly. We want to remove that just to make sure that we manage the spacing if that's something that we want. And above that, we're also selecting the same things again, but here we're going only for the list items. So not the unordered list itself, so not the list, but the items individually. And we're saying, okay, we want to make these bold, right? So they were not bold there, they are bold now. We're giving these a color, which will be the color of the text, right? Which is dark purple, maybe not so visible here. So it looks bluish, so the difference isn't that big. But then also we're giving them a shadow. So this shadow has a depth in like 3 different dimensions. And this is why it's 1 pixel here, 1 pixel there, and 3 pixels. So this is something that we'll cover later as well. And we're giving it a gray color. So that's the shadow that you're seeing in the background. All right. And then we come to something that is very, very important within CSS, which is how every element of HTML is being interacted with, which is the box model. Every element on our page, right? So whether this is a paragraph, whether these are unordered list items, titles, everything is basically a box. That's why it's called the box model. the item itself is inside of this blue rectangle, right? So that's the content, no matter what it is. And then immediately after that, we have the padding. So this is the padding that comes before the border. So if we have a border, so here we have an input field, the input field has a blue border. The padding comes between the element itself and the border surrounding it. Okay, so that's why we have the padding. We have this dotted line to indicate that there is like nothing visible in terms of a barrier between them. And then we have the border itself. And all of these can be manipulated separately. So we can decide how big the padding is in various directions. So up, left, right, bottom, for all of these. And the border itself, it can have a specific thickness, it can have some styling, but it will always surround the padding. And if the padding is 0, so there is no padding, the border will be surrounding the element itself immediately, right? And then we have the margin. So all of these, so until the border, this is surrounding the element directly. The margin itself is space between this element and the element next to it, above it, below it. So any element that's outside of this element itself, right? And this is where, like we had the example in the previous session. So if we have 2 paragraphs, for example, the browser will immediately put some space in between them. And this is some padding that will be there by default when you're creating various paragraphs. And this kind of becomes your biggest problem, or the thing that you have to solve the most when you're trying to put all of the elements of your website or application where you want them to go, right? So you have to kind of navigate the box model, understand how it works, making sure that you're giving your elements the correct padding if they need it, the correct size border if at all, and giving them margin to give them space. But this is only one part of your layout struggle. To make this much easier, and this is how like most modern apps are being laid out, is by using the box sizing, which will basically make the size that you're providing for your element kind of combined with the padding and the border. Let me explain that a bit. So the box model, okay, again, so this is the box model. You have your element, you have padding, you have border. Outside of the border, so outside of the element itself, you have your margin. In here, we have a page. So this is an HTML page, right? And the width of the page is basically from here to here, right? That's the entire, that's 100% of the width. If we don't look at anything else here, but the width, okay, so how wide, the example div. So both of these items that you're seeing here are divs that have the class example div. So if I see that, okay, the width that I've set is 50% of the page, and the page starts here and ends here. So this doesn't look right? So this looks more like 70% of the page, or like even 75% than 50%, right? That is because when you are setting the border to 10 pixels, so this black border, this is not a part of the element size. This is considered something outside of the element itself. And we're giving that size away, and this is taking up space on our page that we didn't really intend for. And we're making the padding 3 rem. What rem means, this is a spacing, and the value for it we'll cover in a bit. But we're giving it 3 times the size of a default text in a browser. And this is where this padding, so all of this empty blue space is the padding based on the 3 rem value that we have decided here. And the margin, remember, the margin is outside of the border. The margin is 1 rem, which is the space in between these elements. So if there was no margin, it would be closer to the top. It will be closer to the left side. It will be closer to an element on the right side if there were any. And it would be actually completely stuck to the element that comes after it if there is no margin. So they will be following each other immediately, and there will be no space in between them. So how do we fix that? And this is where using the box sizing comes in to make it easier to manage, because we can still say that we still want the padding, we still want the border, but we don't want to think about, but how will my border and the padding and everything else change the layout of my page, because now I want to make this 50%, but I'm going to have to deduct basically the percentage or the size that I'm going to give to the border and to the padding from my element in order for all of it to add up to 50%. So when we're using the box model or the box sizing, and we're saying the box sizing attribute has the value of border box, this means that the element itself will contain all of the space within the border. That's why it's called border box. So if we go back previously, these are the exact same values. So we're still giving it 10 pixel solid border, we're still giving it 3 rem of padding, and we're still giving it 1 rem of margin. Now the margin doesn't change, right? So the margin again is outside. So this is the space between these two elements. But as you can see, now it's really covering 50% of the page. There is always some space that is being reserved on the sides by the browser automatically. It's something that we can get rid of using CSS, but by default, there will be some spacing. But now, when the browser is rendering this element and this one, it is basically saying, okay, so you want this element to be 50% of the page, right? And it will basically squeeze the element in how wide it is to include the 10 pixel for the border and the padding, the 3 rem that we've added around the text. And all of this is 50% of the page. So it's not giving the text only 50% of the page like it was doing previously. And then after that, it's adding 3 rem of padding around it and then 10 pixels of solid border. Which makes it much bigger than the 50% that we initially wanted it to have. And this is one of the ways to define how your elements are going to be displayed and where they get displayed on your page based on the design that you're looking for or the idea that you have, right? There are many ways to achieve this, but this is by far the easiest and simplest one to implement. And again, you'll most probably not do this yourself, but I strongly recommend you to play around with the box sizing in the box model itself, because it is a lot of fun. So I'm gonna show you a bit of that right now. So we're going to cover this next, but I'm just going to use this side to show you how the box model works. So if we go back to our dev tools, right? So again, if on any page, you can just right click and click on inspect, and this will open your developer tools. Last week, we looked at the HTML that makes up the page. Today, we're going to spend more time looking at CSS. So if we're going to select any element inside of our website here, we're going to cover this website in a bit, so don't bother too much with what it does at the moment. If I will select this, for example, and I will scroll all the way down on the style. So here we have the dev tools. it's kind of covered. It's split in two sections. So above here we have the elements, we have the console and everything, and down here we have a different part of it that kind of shows us the page that is currently rendered. And if we are in the styles tab, it shows us all of the style that is applied to the element that we selected. And if we scroll all the way down, we will see a representation of the box model, the one that I have in the slide. So it will show you, if you hover over the element, so the inside rectangle, it will highlight the heading itself, right? And it's showing you here how large it is in pixels. So it's 752 by 56 pixels. You can also see the padding is basically 0. So all around, we're only seeing, there's no number. There are no numbers anywhere, right? So it's just a dash. The border is also completely empty. There is no border whatsoever, right? As we can see also here, there is no border being shown. But we only have a little bit of margin. If we hover over the margin, you see that there is a orange line that appears above the title or the heading. That's basically keeping it separate from the color codes text that is right above it. And we can do the same for anything else. So we can take any other element. So let's say we're going to take this color right here. And again, we're going to scroll all the way down. You see that the color itself is only 32 by 32 pixels. It has no padding, no border, no margin whatsoever. And if we're going to do this for any of these, for example, yeah, or maybe for this whole thing, which will be a bit more interesting. So you can see that we have the element itself. We have some padding on both sides to make it more or less equal with the rest of the page below it. There's no border being used, no margin, right? And it shows you the size. So in this fashion, you can actually see how the page is laid out using the box model over here. And there is much more to cover. So the element itself that we selected has many, many different styles, or like at least styles that are being applied to it. But we can go to only the computed ones. So if we look at the styles, it basically shows us all of the styles that are there for this specific web page that we're seeing. And as you can see, there's a lot of information in here. But if we go to computed, so these are the styles that were actually applied to this page when we visited it. It's still like showing the item that we're selecting, but if we are going to select like the entire page, for example, so here we're just going to click on all of it. And again, we're on the computed part. It shows us the box model, but then it shows you a lot of the attributes. So it has a background color. It has a lot of different colors that are being denoted for various components of it, right? And this shows you basically every little piece of information of the page that you're on. And again, if we go back to the styles and we click on any like specific element, we can also see the computed information for that dedicated element. So for this one that we've selected now, this is its size. This is the padding around it, which is 16 pixels above and below, and 24 pixels to the left and to the right. No border to speak of. And then you can see all of the other pieces of CSS that have been applied to this one single element that we've selected, right? So this is where the developer tool really comes in handy to help you understand the websites that you're visiting and the apps that you're building and how these all come together. All right. Okay. All right. Any questions regarding the box model, or is it all smooth sailing so far? Okay. All right. Moving on. All right. One thing that is quite important. Actually, multiple things that are quite important: typography, colors, backgrounds, and your visual identity of the app. And we'll start by covering fonts. And when we declare fonts, right? So let me switch to my desktop view and go to SAAS document. And okay, so in here, I don't think I have any fonts, which is fine, because this is the thing that I actually want to show. Because again, when we're building our app, right, everything that we're building, so our HTML, CSS so far, is there to instruct the browser to set up and show our app the way that we designed it. So here, we have not told our browser what kind of font we want to use. So it uses Times New Roman by default. This is the default font for pretty much any browser, which is fine. So this is how it's going to look. Also, as you would remember from our HTML session, is that we have, for example, heading 1 until 6, where 1 is the biggest and heading 6 is the smallest, just like you have in your like word processors and things like that. And all of that styling is decided by the browser automatically. So that means that even if you don't style your page, there is going to be a lot of styling applied automatically, just because that is the default of the browser. So how do we change that? Because in the past, right, again, this is not very relevant for building a modern app, but it might be depending on the kind of app that you're going to build. The fonts were in like someone's computer. So whenever you visit a website, the website will display the font based on whether the browser that you're using on your own computer has the same font that the person used to build their website. And if it didn't, this is what you'll see. So even if the person designing the website has a very different font than yours, but that font isn't on your computer, when you visit their webpage, you will see this font, right? Nowadays, with like web technologies and websites and web apps and like mobile apps and desktop apps becoming the modern way of like building any app, we have a lot of free fonts that anyone can use, because fonts back in the day used to be copyrighted. So these used to be created by companies and they expect you to pay money for them. These still exist, of course. There are a lot of fonts that still you have to pay licenses for, but there are also a lot of fonts that you don't need to, right? And one of the most common places to look for these fonts is going to be somewhere like Google Fonts. So if we go to Google Fonts, there are so if we remove the it's right here. 1,862 font families. And what is a font family? So for me personally, I like the Roboto font because I think it looks very clean and modern. But again, I mean, there are plenty. The family is made out of different styles, because if you're building your app, you might want to have like normal thin text, right? You might want to have that same normal thin text in italic. But you might want to have different weightings. So this is where the weight comes in. So you have 200, which is a little bit heavier than the 100. You have 300, and all of them have also an italic version. 400 all the way to like medium and bold text, right? Bold and semi-bold. And these are free. Google Fonts is of course not the only one that does that, but this is one of the most popular ones. And you can visit this website, and you can say, okay, I like this font, I want to use it on my app. And you do that in one of two ways. So you can either download the font and have it as a part of your application. So when someone opens your app, it will be downloaded as a part of the application. So it's inside of an application folder, and you're good to go. You can also not do that and embed it. So basically, whenever someone opens your app, this font will be requested from Google Fonts, and Google Fonts will provide the files necessary to display this font, right? So at this moment, it will give you, like, you can either link it inside of your HTML. So it says here, embed code in the head of your HTML, right? And then it tells you inside of your CSS, this is how you can use the style. And by default, it will also, like, you can use this for web, you can use it specifically for Android, for iOS, for Flutter, which is a development framework to develop apps for Android and iOS at the same time. For us, we're going to be designing for the web primarily, and we're going to import it. So I don't want to link this in my HTML. I'm going to import it into my CSS directly. So how that works is that we're still having to put this in the head of our HTML. The difference is that when I say I want to import it, it will request this font at the time that the page loads, right? So it will become available anytime afterwards. If I'm linking it, I'm just saying, okay, these are the links to the fonts, and once the font needs to be rendered, it will be requested. There is not a massive difference between using one or the other. So I'm just going with the import for now. So inside of our HTML, we're going to have to add this, but I'm not going to be adding this because it kind of adds the entire library. So it will give me all of the different weights. I want to just choose one. So I'm going to choose, for example, regular 400 as a style. I'll have the italic as well, and that's it. I'm not going to change anything else. You can change the width of, like, the spacing between the letters, so normal, condensed, and then, or condensed or semi-condensed. Again, we're not going to bother with that. That's it. So basically, when I've done that, it will update the link that it provides to where now when I use it, it will automatically only use this value, right? And if I change this around, you see that the link gets updated accordingly, and then the information is updated here accordingly as well. So we're going to copy this, go back to our code editor and say, okay, on our page, we're going to be adding it. It says that we need to add it to the head, which is great. I'm going to put this right before we're adding our CSS. I'm going to indent this one properly. So style, and inside the style we're importing. And I'm going to save that, go back to the page. So it's saying, okay, this is how you would set up your font, which is great. Now here it doesn't, it's not selecting any element for us, right? So it's just giving us some code to work with, and we can like do with it whatever we want. So if we go back to our page and we say that we're going to paste this in here again, so this is red. This is made red by the code editor because it's like, okay, you don't use this anywhere, which is fine because this is also using these characters that are invalid for naming within CSS. So we're gonna make this basically the body, right? So the entire body of the page, anything that's in the body, we want that to use. The font family needs to be Roboto, which is the one that we're importing. Now you also see that there is a list of fonts. And why do we have these? So if we go back to our slide, and I go here to the previous slide, in this sample, I have a font family of multiple fonts, right? So we have an Apple system font, we have someone that's similar as well, we have CGO UI, we have Roboto as well, and at the end, we have sans serif. Sans serif is just a type of font that just says this is the style that we want to use. And if the browser that the user is currently using, because they might be like offline, for example, and loading our app somehow, or not being able to connect to any of these systems that are housing these fonts. These first two are specific to Mac users, so any Windows user will not have these by default anyway. So if all of these are not available in the browser of the user, it will just use whatever sans serif font that the browser has at that time. And this is what it does. So if we go back to our CSS, right? And we're going to say, okay, our body, or we can even make this HTML. So anything that's inside of our HTML will use these fonts. And we save that. We go back to our page and we refresh it. And as you can see, it loaded very briefly with the old font, but then it got the font from Google, and now it's displaying everything in the Roboto font that we chose. Right. This is where the font come in. And again, if the font becomes unavailable, or if I reload the page and I'm not connected to the internet, and the font cannot be gotten from Google Fonts, it will just display the old font that was here before. And that's how you decide the font that you use. So again, you're going to be using one primarily, but again, it is very good practice to provide multiple options that look the same, and have kind of the same spacing and like letter heights and whatnot. To make sure that your application looks consistent, even if the font that you are using primarily isn't available. Because as you will see when you play around with this, different fonts have wildly different like spacing between letters and heights of letters and whatnot, which can really make your application look very different if you would use anything else. Okay. So yeah, that would cover it for fonts, at least for now. Any questions about fonts? Was it interesting? Yeah. All right, sorry, just checking that we're still running, that my audio is still working. Okay. Now, let's move on to colors. So if I go back to my code editor, we have, of course, in our page already provided color to some various parts of our app. But there are different ways to provide colors, and this is something that we'll touch upon so that you can make your own decisions or like choose whatever you want to use, preferably going forward, and then you can kind of research that a bit. So colors have different ways of being set. For example, here we have the nav bar. We're setting the background color of the nav bar using a hex code or a hexadecimal code, which is denoted with a hashtag, and then a combination of 6 hexadecimal characters. So these are from 0 to from 1 to 0, and then from A to F. And these basically can be gotten from any like design, how do you call it, design application or any kind of design template. If we go back to this like colors page that we were looking at before, you can see that, okay, we have this color that is seemingly called Indian red, and it has a hex code. So this will be like the hashtag, and then you have this code here. So this is one way of providing, and it has a dedicated scheme. So every color specifically has a specific code, and that's what you would use. Simple enough, right? The other option would be to use RGB. So any screen nowadays, any screen in the past like so many years is using RGB. So red, green, and blue to create all of the colors that you're seeing, right? So RGB and RGBA notation is also a way to determine the color that you're going to choose. But it works differently, right? So where hexadecimal color is just like you have a hex code that has a specific code that denotes that color. With RGB, you're setting your RGB mix basically. So instead of just providing a code, you're saying, okay, I want RGB and I want red to be a specific value, and I want green to be a specific value, and blue to be a specific value. And so you're mixing these up, and based on the mix that you create, you will get your color. So if again we go back to this colors page, you can see that, for example, if we take this Rebecca purple over here, it has a hex code, but it has also an RGB value. So it says that this is basically 102 red, 51 green, and 153 blue, right? And this is a mix again, like you have color wheels that can tell you exactly what all of these are. But this is a way for you to kind of mix colors yourself without relying on codes to do so. And the last one is going to be, and there is one thing that's common between RGB and HSL, which we'll cover together. So HSL works similarly to RGB, but yet very differently, because there is only one of the three values that actually decides the color, which is the hue. And it is within a 360 kind of degree. So it's like a full circle. So it starts with 0 and ends with 360. And this represents basically all of the colors that you can select. So each one of these is a color shade. So this is a hue. And then the second one, the S, is for saturation. So how much of that color do you want to see? So if the saturation is 0%, it will be black and white, basically. And then the lightness is how bright that color needs to be. So if you have saturation of 50%, it will be colorful. And if it's 50% brightness, it will be relatively bright. So the color will be not very visible or like perceived as a normal color. And then both for RGB and HSL, you have an A variant. So I have RGBA and HSL-A, where in both cases, the A adds transparency. So with RGBA, you can make your whatever it is that you're coloring opaque or transparent, and the value goes from 0 to 1. So from 0 being completely transparent to 1 being completely visible. So if you set something to a 0.5 value, it will be in the middle. It will be somewhat transparent. And the same goes for HSLA, which goes between a value of 0 again to 1, where it is not transparent, so it's fully visible, and 0.0, which is fully transparent. And again, if we go back to our color page over here, you see that it provides this value again for like all of the colors that it has listed. And the reason why we're even looking at this page isn't for all of these codes. but because there is one more way that you can specify a color for any element in your app, which is by named colors. So there are roughly 150 colors that have an actual name that you can use. So, and this is what this page kind of primarily does. So it will show you that, okay, this color has this name. So all of these colors, this is the name that they have. And basically, if you take any of these, right? So let's take, for example, the medium purple here. If I go to my code editor and I'm like, okay, this is cool. I want to get rid of this, and I want to call this medium. And you can see that it shows me all of the options. So basically, the code editor knows, okay, this is a color, of course. I'm trying to select the color here. So when I type medium, it's showing me all of the different options. But as you can see, also the code editor is also showing me the hex code for this specific color, so that if I want to use the hex code moving forward, that I can use that instead of using the name itself. So I can select it; it will replace the value that was there previously. And then I can choose that. You can see that it's the same thing here for the white, for example, where it says white and it's not actually providing a hex code. So you can use either one. All right. Good. Okay. Okay. Moving on with the more CSS magic. So everything that we've covered so far is more about a bit of layout, a bit of styling, how to make things look different, nice or not on your page. But there is a more important topic, which is how do you divide things across your page? So your app will have many different components, right? So if we take, for example, the Humble Devs website as an example, we have our nav bar, we have our hero section. So the main section, or the place where people land when they visit your app, is called the hero section. That's what this is. And if we scroll down, we have a different component. So this is a different section of our page, which has a title. It has some other element here in the middle, and it has all of these boxes that are equally spaced out with like text in them that has also some equal spacing. And again, we have something else that has its own kind of spacing, and then we have another section that has its own layout, so to speak. How do you set up your page to look like that? And this is your other challenge, apart from deciding on like the margins and the padding and the border and all of that space. But how do you make sure that elements or components of your page follow each other in a logical order, the way that you envisioned at some point, right? And this is where a Flexbox comes in. And this is a very different attribute. So where before, like with the padding and the margins and everything, we were looking at each individual element, right? This is looking at a container. So per container, you can decide how that container will display all of the elements that are inside of it. And I'll show you an example of that in just a second. And what makes the Flexbox solution so powerful is that in the container itself, you can say, okay, the container will get an attribute which is called display. So this will define how that container itself. So if this is a div, so this is a part of our page. So if we go to our page, and we say that, okay, we have our main section. So this can be a container. So we say that our main, for example, in our CSS, we will give that the display flex, right? And then flex is configurable. So this is just saying that, okay, we want to use the flex functionality within our main container. And then we have a flex direction. And the direction will state whether the element, so anything that is inside of our main container, will be in a row, so it will be horizontal, or in a column, so it will be stacked on top of each other. It will also state how to justify them, so how these will be aligned. So this will be alignment along the main axis. Again, we'll show you that in a second. And then it will align all of the items across the axis, and it will allow for the wrapping. So how will these overflow when they reach the limit of the width of the screen that someone is looking at? So for that, we have something that is very beautiful that we can look at, which is this. So let me explain this briefly. So the above portion here isn't important. This is how this is built, but this is a very powerful visual representation of Flexbox. So in here on this left side, we're looking at the container. So in our code editor, again, if we said that this is the main is going to be our container, everything in it is an element. So or like an item within the container. So this section will be an item in the container, the article, this form, everything, right? So if we're saying we're setting up a flex for this specific part, we have the following options for the flex direction, which is going to be in a row. So all of these elements are next to each other if they fit. A reverse row, which will make it so that they start from the other side of the screen. So a screen is normally populated from left to right, from top to bottom. Reverse means that we're starting from right to left, but still, of course, from top to bottom. And then we have column. That means that we're not going horizontally, but vertically. So all of the items will be stacked on top of each other. And this is great for mobile view, for example. If you're like seeing something on a desktop where everything fits next to each other, then this is great. But if you're opening an application on a mobile phone, you would expect this kind of view. So this is where the direction becomes very important. And then we have a reverse column, which is again starting from the bottom, going to the top, right? So this is for the Flex container. So we're configuring the big container for which we've decided to use Flex on. And then we have the wrapping. So if we say there is no wrapping, all of the elements will be just following one another. If we say we want to wrap based on how wide the screen is, the overflowing item, so we have item 1, 2, 3, and then there is no space here anymore. They will wrap down and they will continue again from left to right. Okay. When we say there is no wrap, they will be squeezed together to fit them within the space that is available to them, right? So they will not move anywhere. They will be squeezed until all of them fit. But if we're wrapping them and we've given them a specific width, for example, per component, then they will take up that width, and after that they will overflow down onto the page. And then we can do the reverse as well, where we start with the last and we go down to the first. And then we have alignment, which is something that you have to kind of start to play with. So we can say that, okay, how will items align? They will align at the flex start, so at the start of the box. So where is the main item that we are enabling the flex container on? Everything will start where that thing starts, or when it ends. So it will end at the size of that item. It will be in the center, so they will be in the middle of the size of that container. Baseline, which will be like somewhere like on the top side of the container, and it will, if stretch, it will basically stretch all of them across the entire parent container. Okay. And the justification, so how to justify the content, is how you divide space across them. So if we say that, so what it's trying to show you here is that we have a page that is wide. All of the elements fit in half of the screen, right? So if we say, okay, all of them will be, the content will be justified to the start of the flex. It will start at the left of the parent container, or at the end, which is not something that we haven't seen. However, if we say that, okay, we want to actually divide the space between all of them, the bigger the space is, the more space dynamically will be allotted between them. But the ones at the beginning and the end will be all the way at the edge. So they will not have space on the left side and the right side, right? We can put them in the center, so they will all be there, or you can have space around. And this is the one that is most commonly used because it gives like everything a natural like space, so that even the ones at the end, they have some spacing from the walls around them, right? And this is how you can easily center content in your page versus doing it other methods, which can be quite complex, right? And then you have, the alignments of like everything, which we've already covered. So if you have like many elements at the start, at the end, in the center, space in between. So this is like grouping them together, space all around, and then stretching them across your entire canvas. Now, if we're not talking about the container itself, so the parent container that is using Flex, but the items inside of the container that also have to adhere to the Flex rules. So the item itself will also need to use Flex properties and attributes in order to put itself on the display properly, right? So align self is for an element, right? So if we say that the main is the Flex container, the section is going to be one of the Flex items. And on the section, we will then say, okay, align self either automatically or at the start of the Flex. So you see that it moves up to kind of start at the starting point of the parent container, or like its own container, a Flex end, center, baseline, and it will stretch itself across the entire space. If we have a space that we have pre-designed, so we've decided how wide the space will be, how high it will be, we can also set our items to grow, either all the same or not. So if we're going to make one grow 1, so this will divide the overall value across all of them. So if we have no growth for any of them, all of them will be the same size. If we make the growth for all of them 1, they will also be the same size. But now they're filling up the entire space, right? So if we go down, right? So they had their initial space, right? But when we enable grow, we're telling them, okay, you can now become bigger than your like predefined size, but still staying within the parent container, right? That is using Flex. And if we want one to be bigger than the other, then we just tell that one to grow. So it will have a Flex grow property, while the rest don't. We can also we can give all of them a Flex grow, but then still make one of them bigger than the rest. And the bigger that this one becomes, it will then squeeze out the rest, basically. Right, and we can also, like, if we say that we want the last one to also be equally big as the first one and squeeze the rest in the middle, that's possible. And this is how you can achieve that. Shrink is the opposite. So if you have elements that are automatically filling space, but you want them to reduce the space that they're using, then you can use shrink to do the opposite of growth. So they will become smaller by a factor. Okay. So the Flex bases you can combine a lot of attributes together if that's something that you're looking for. This is quite complex, so it's not something that I really want to dive into now, because I don't think there is like a lot of value in like learning this specifically. As long as you know that Flex allows for a lot of like micro manipulation of your elements, then this is something that you can look into if you really have a need for that. And then last but not least is an order. So you can order elements, and this is something that is used when you want to shuffle things around dynamically, especially if you're like, for example, if you have multiple cards or like multiple visible elements on a screen, and you allow a user, for example, to order these in different ways. Uh, when they get reordered, you can use, for example, basically the ordering can be shuffled around by the order of Flex, where one of them will become the last, and like another one will become the first, and things like that. This can also be used if you're like checking off something where where it then all of a sudden dynamically gets a higher value of Flex, and then it moves down to the screen, and then everything that is unchecked will basically rise to the top. So this is an example of a use case of using order to manipulate where items are being displayed. All right. Okay. I hope that was somewhat enjoyable and not too confusing. But Flexbox really takes quite some time to understand. And if you really want to dive into manipulating where items are being displayed um, on your page, there is a game that you can play, which is called flexboxfroggy.com. So you can visit here, and you have 24 challenges that you can undertake. With it's starting very simple by moving the frog onto its pad, and as you move down, it will get more and more complex. And this will really show you like all of the power of Flexbox, and how it allows you to manipulate how different elements within a container can be put wherever you want them to end up. All right. Just a fun thing that you can do if that's something that you're looking for, or if you think that that kind of thing is fun. All right. And yeah, with all of that, I think it's become quite apparent why CSS is quite more complex than talking about HTML. So yeah, all of the Flexbox things we've just covered with this little demo. So I don't think I'll be explaining too much about these code snippets here. We've seen all of that. You're more than welcome to play around with these. But why is that important at the end of the day, right? So why we bother with things like Flex and Flexboxes? Well, because if you are uh, designing your app, right, you have to make it work for a variety of devices. A user that's going to be visiting your application can do that on a computer, can do that on a tablet, can do that on a mobile phone, and it has to adhere to um, the screen size, the resolution, the width and height of all of these screens. Um, and CSS provides you with the tools to do that. But in order to make it so that your application looks and functions properly for all of these different screen sizes, you have to keep this into account. And you have to adapt your design or layout of your application to accommodate for these different screens. It's not difficult, but it's something that you have to think about, that you have to implement and test as you build out your application. Um, So just to give a very, very simple example, if we would actually, I'll show that example in a bit. So how do we do that? Within a CSS document, you can you have a media tag. So if we go to our code editor here, and I go to my CSS, so right here is a styling that is dedicated for, so at media, which can be a variety of different things, at least initially when at media was introduced. It used to be used for different types of devices. Nowadays, it's being used only to dictate how big a device should be for this to apply. And this one specifically says that, okay, if the, a media, okay, has a minimum width, right? So the smallest canvas that it has is 768 pixels, right? We want this to apply. So we want to have, anything that has a class container to have this padding, a specific width, and then a margin. It is deciding some like product grid. So this is how, like, for example, a product, how do you call it? A product square will look like. And then if we're saying that, okay, if it has a max width, then we want to dictate something else. So this is how you can normally, you would have 3 of these or 2. So basically you can design primarily for mobile use, which is a very common practice nowadays. So people will design their application first for use on mobile devices, because most people who will interact with the application will most probably be doing that through a mobile device. And then creating the at media handlers to handle for a larger screen. So whether that's a tablet and whether that is a desktop computer. And I mean, it is great that we have nowadays LLMs that can write a lot of that for you, because if you have already decided on your application and you have your design established, whether this is for mobile or for desktop, you can ask it to easily adapt that for your for other screen sizes, and it will do that just fine, because you've already provided all of the design and all of the context that it needs in order to do that properly. So it's something that is important to keep in mind, but maybe not something that you'll be actively scripting out. And again, this is we defined already previously in HTML that, okay, we have a viewport. That's what we're calling the screen on which someone is viewing something, and then it will have the device width by default, as well as a scale of 1, and using the at media and like some kind of minimum width or maximum width. You can then change that around. All right. One last thing for today that I want to touch upon is the project file structure, because as I mean, until now we've kind of been doing whatever we want, which does need to change, especially when we start building our app. So how do we structure our application properly? Your main HTML page. So you can have many. So for any page on your website or your application, you will have an HTML page or even multiple ones. But your main page. So if you're going to be publishing a website online or an application, your main page is going to be called index.html. That's going to be your main page that houses the page that people will land on when they visit again. So if we go to the Humble Devs website, this is called index.html, because that is what most platforms that host applications nowadays expect your primary page to be called, right? So our index page, and the root directory is basically the most top level folder in which your application resides. So if I go back to my code editor, that would be this folder. So even inside of my Finder, so if I go to the actual folder in my computer here, this folder, which if you're going to upload this onto a service, is not even going to be a folder. So it's just going to be here, the starting point. That's why it's called root. It will need to house your index.html. And above that, we'll work on structuring as we add more things into it. Normally, you will have a folder that will house your like CSS. So you can have a folder in here that's just called CSS, which is very common. And inside of there, you will have your style.css, and you can have multiple styling sheets as well. So you're not limited to one. So if you want different parts of your app to look very differently, in order not to make your CSS too long or like too convoluted with like plenty of various like types of styling, then you can just make it so that it will just simply, you link different style sheets to different HTML pages, and they will be styled accordingly, right? For your media, so if you have anything that you want to have as like a video or like a picture or like an audio file inside of your application, you can have a media folder. And this will change drastically as we start using our tech stack later on, because the tech stack will decide on our behalf how this should look like. But I thought I'd just show you how it is expected for all of this to be laid out. And here, right? So having said that, yeah, so our root directory, responsive design, great. Okay. I did want to touch on the fact that we've looked quite extensively at flex, right? So this is the display property, again, for a specific element or container inside of our HTML, but it's by far not the only way to manage putting things on your screen wherever you want them. It is the most flexible one. It is the most powerful one that you can use. Well, there are grids, so you can like divide your screen in grids, and this is something that I can show you over here as well. So if I try to select an element, as I move across the page, you will see a lot of vertical lines, and this is basically just means that this page is made out of. I need to go to a white space. So here, you see all of these lines that have the same spacing. This is a grid. So this page is made out of grids, and basically the designer can say that, okay, this element, so this text, okay, it starts here at grid 1, and it will stretch across 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 grids. And these remaining grids are currently unused. And if you want to put something on grid 8 and grid 9, you just tell it that's where you want it to go. Which is a different way of dividing the space of your app and putting things where they belong. So there are plenty of options out there, and whether you use one or the other will highly depend on your needs, on like your own preference, or maybe even the framework that you're using or the kind of app that you're building, and what it would prefer in that respect. So there's quite a lot. You can visit this webpage, which I will link in the Discord server, and kind of go to the CSS display, and you can see all of the different ways that displays can be manipulated. I wouldn't spend too much time on here, but it's good to at least have a general idea of all of the options that you have at your disposal, right? And yeah, all right. Last couple of things. So last week, I also did show off very briefly, which I'm going to do again. Because now we've covered CSS quite extensively. So this is a Kanban task manager app, which is not fully functional at the moment. So the only component that we have at the moment, or that I have at the moment, is the front end, because none of this information is being stored anywhere at the moment, right? But if I open this HTML page, so I'm just going to copy its path, go back to my browser, open it here. And this is how it looks like without any styling. So this is how it looks like out of the box, no styling whatsoever, right? So what I have, or at least if I'm building this HTML, right, just thinking about what I'm building, I'm going to have a heading. I have my to do. So I'm going to have 3 columns, which the first one is going to be to do. The second one is going to be something that is in progress that I'm working on. And the third one is going to be anything that is already done. And my idea is to have these 3 columns. I can create cards in each one of them with like a task that I want to perform, possibly give it a date, and a title, of course, and then be able to drag them across the different the 3 different columns, right? So I would lay it out in this kind of fashion. So I'm going to have the to-do list, and then I might have some items in this. So all of these are like in here, like put in manually, right? Because again, we don't have a database. We're not storing this information somewhere else now, for in progress as well as for done. And then I have a way to add cards to each one of these, right? And this is again how it looks without any kind of styling. And if you would go ahead and style this properly, right? So you would add a background, you would give it colors, you will make the columns distinct and give them like some how do you call it, some shadow to give it a bit of depth, to give it some hover effects and all of these kind of things. So I'm gonna add my CSS. So the CSS is here, and I'm just going to reload the page. And this is how it looks like with the CSS applied. Again, like this can be like considered finished or not. But you can see that, okay, you have a background, the title, or like the nav has its own kind of styling. We have a gradient background. We have a style per column. We have the add cards here, which is of course very different than how it looked when you just have a field that you can enter text in HTML, and we have our various cards, right? So they kind of give this illusion that they're like moving up a little bit, or like having more shadow being dropped on under them when you hover on them. And all of this is due to the power of CSS and all of the manipulation that it provides. Also, it provides this kind of functionality. Again, it doesn't do anything because we're still not using JavaScript, which we'll start doing during the next session. But eventually we'll be able to grab one. So currently everything that you're seeing is all CSS. So I'm grabbing it, it's hovering the item that I have in my hand. And eventually I'll be able to drop it here, and due to JavaScript doing things in the background, it will take this information and then put it in this bucket instead of here. But yeah, this is something that I just wanted to show again because it really highlights the power of CSS and what it does for your app, because it is very powerful, right? Okay. Just running through my checklist very quickly to make sure that I have not missed anything. If you have any questions, or if there is anything that is unclear, please feel free to drop these in the chat, and I'll answer them right away. Oh yeah, one last thing that I actually wanted to remind people of, because plenty of people have signed up, but they have never joined the Discord server. So once you've joined, so you've been in, you've come to the website, you've signed up, right? And then you get an email in your inbox to verify your email address. When you click on the link, it will bring you back to the website, where if you're doing it at the same time, you will already be logged in. And then you have your account page here. If you don't see the account page and you have a sign in button, you click here, you sign in again. I'm not going to go to the account page now just because it has some sensitive information of myself. But you go to your account page, and in the account page, there is a Discord section. And you can then log in with your Discord account, and it will automatically add you to our private Discord server. And from there, you can get notified of the streams when they go live, all of the additional information that will be posted in there, as well as starting from next week, we'll have a second stream on the Sunday that will dive deeper into the content of that week, the things that you're expected to be doing during the week after the stream. And it's somewhere that you can just come and like work on your homework or like ask questions or just follow along with the bits and pieces that I'll be scripting out, because I'm going to be building a SAAS as well, while giving you this course. So I'll give you an example of what I'm building as we go along, so that whenever you're going to be struggling in the future with getting something working, I will most probably be doing the same, and then I can help you out to get unstuck and continue building, because at the end of the day, all of us were going to be using the same tech stack. And even though if you're going to be building something different than myself, the technology will be the same. So the places where you will get stuck in the future will most probably be the things that I will be making additional streams about, and maybe some additional sessions to help people understand why they're getting stuck, the things that they're missing, or maybe they have to change their approach in whatever it is that they're trying to do at the moment. All right. So again, sign up, go to your account page after verifying your email, and connect your Discord account to join the Discord server. All right. I think that is all for today. And your objective for this week, I'll be posting some links in the week 2 stream channel regarding everything that I've covered. There will be a number of links in there for web pages that you can visit to read up a little bit more about all of the topics that we've covered today. And your target for the coming week is to build using HTML and CSS the initial landing page of the SaaS that you want to build. It doesn't need to be very elaborate. Just create your HTML structure very roughly and add the CSS to that you want. And basically, when you get to that point, you will be ready for next week's stream, where we'll be covering 2 things. So we'll be diving a little bit into JavaScript, because JavaScript is quite a complex topic. Again, I mean, CSS is complex, and a lot of people work on front end professionally for their job. That's all they do. They work on front end problems. They work on CSS all the time, because again, it's a deep topic. But JavaScript is on a different level in that respect. And we'll also be diving into using AI to generate some components of our app. We're going to be comparing a lot of the AI models that are available to you, which ones you should use. As far as I'm concerned, at the end of the day, it's up to you. You can use whatever you please, but I'm going to give you my recommendations and why I prefer to use them. We're going to talk about cost, because that's also very important. And because at the end of the day, I don't want you to pay for anything now. And we're going to cover where you should start and at what point should you be converting to using AI within a code editor specifically, because that's also going to be very important. So these are going to be the topics for next week. So thanks again for joining for today. Have fun building the initial landing page of your SaaS. Again, do think about the SaaS that you want to build if you have not decided on one already. I'll be posting some ideas on the week 2 channel as well, but feel free to think of something yourself. All right. Thank you very much for joining. Have a great day and see you in the next session. Take care.